Hey, I just wanted to talk a little before I get into anything specific. This video is just for fun. Just, chatting a little bit. Maybe we can go back and forth and have a little banter in the comments or whatever, but it's not really to, argue about anything, really. It's just having a chat, if you will. I know it's probably weird seeing a PNG talking to you about teaching, but frankly speaking, I don't want my face linked to a channel that isn't really going to help me. So, I mean, yeah. Not necessarily saying there's anything that's going to hurt me here, but I don't necessarily want to be in there, just for anonymity's sake. That's why I'm a little PNG. Don't worry about it. But today, I figured I'd just have a little fun talking about something that I feel like we don't really think about. I think if we do think about it, we know this, but we don't necessarily think about it to know it. If you catch my drift. The basic idea I was thinking about was just like back in school, you see like someone's pretending to be sick or whatever. And as a classmate, I feel like, sometimes you assume, yeah, they're probably not. But it's more so based on you knowing these people and things like that you're making these assumptions. And I think a lot of the times when we think back to when we're, in like elementary school or something, or middle school, we think, man, I did it. I just pulled off the greatest heist. I escaped my confines and finally made it out of that classroom. Thank the gods. I'm free. I'm homebound. And I think a lot of the time, I don't know, we don't think about it at the time, but maybe when we're older, we realize your teacher knows you're sick. Like, or they know you're not sick, right? Like, they know what's true and what's not. Frankly speaking, I've never met a kid under the age of, 15 that's good at acting. They're all really bad. Now, listen, if you went to a school that's centered around the arts, hey, maybe you can pull it off. But frankly speaking, most schools don't. And in a public school, you see, as a teacher, you watch this kid and you're like, he's faking this. It's 100% he's faking it. The reason you get away with it isn't necessarily like, oh man, I'm slick. I am so smooth getting away with this. This is easy. It's more so just the teacher doesn't want to be responsible if you do just so happen to be sick. They don't think you are. They just think, I don't want to be responsible if he is, right? It's more about just the job's position and just thinking to myself, do I really want to risk that? I know they're faking, but is it really worth it? No. Most of the time, no. That's 99% of the time, it's not worth it. So, I just thought it was kind of funny thinking back where, you think, oh man, you're slick. I remember specifically back in the day, sick days, or I would go to school and, I don't know, maybe halfway through the day I would say, man, I'm not feeling great. Can I go to the nurse? I go to the nurse, and they don't even really care if you're sick or not. They'll let you call home. And as long as you can convince your mother or father or whoever, your guardian, to let you go home, they'll let you go home. It's one of those things where it's funny thinking back, and I was thinking to myself probably at that time, listen, I can't say for sure, but I imagine I was thinking to myself, oh man, I am a professional getting away with this. When in reality, every teacher probably knew. They knew when they were sending me down, they knew the second I came in, they knew. And I think some kids try to be slick and, they'll do things earlier. For example, I had a kid. He comes in, he's hobbling on one leg repeatedly, right? He's going through, he's oh, hopping, jumping. And then he sits in his seat and he's perfectly fine for the rest of class. And you're just what exactly was the disconnect here that makes me think one of those is normal, one of them's not? I can see him walking around perfectly fine later in the class. Near the end of the class, he's hobbling, going back and forth. Sometimes he's laughing, having fun with friends, joking around. And then other times he's just randomly making noises that are probably the fakest noises you could possibly make, right? You know what I'm talking about. Like you're ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ooh. Basically the kinds of things you would see in like a cartoon or something, right? It's one of those situations where like he's faking. But the second you give him permission because you're like, I don't want to deal with this, he walks out perfectly fine on his own two legs, doesn't care, and leaves, right? Now in this situation, it's like, oh, well, if you know he's faking, why don't you keep him? Like I said, it's not worth the trouble. It's really not. Frankly speaking, at the end of the day, if they're going to get out of class, all it does is hinder them. And of course you want them to stay. Of course you're going to encourage them to stay. Maybe once or twice you'll say like, oh, are you really feeling that bad? But at the end of the day, I mean, you're not going to get them to stick in that seat if they don't want to stick in that seat, right? So it's kind of one of those things where sometimes you have to bust under the pressure, right? You have to think to yourself like, there's really not much I can do here. And I mean, it sucks. You want them to stay. And a vast majority of the time, they probably will. You'll probably catch them and say like, is it really that bad? Blah, blah, blah. And they'll think to themselves like, I'm okay. You know, things are on the up and up. Who knows, right? But it's frankly, it's funny just to me thinking back at how like, I don't know, how every kid thinks they're so good. Like, man, I am the best. I convinced them. I know more than them. It's fine. I'm out of here. When in reality, you probably don't. Another thing that I think is kind of funny is, I don't know your life. I don't know what you've experienced, but when someone cheats on a test, right? They probably think to themselves like, I am smooth in getting away with this. But the biggest issue I feel like people don't think about until they turn it in, maybe they think about it years later, maybe they realize this, in high school, college, whatever. Teachers read the tests, right? They can tell if you just took answers. Like, it's not... You might think it's not obvious, but it's obvious. It's very, very obvious. And a lot of the times, maybe they're not looking at every single person in the class, and they don't have necessarily direct proof that you were looking at another person's tests. That's why they don't really call you out. It's not a matter of they don't think you cheated. It's a matter of they can't prove you cheated. And I feel like a lot of people don't think about that, really. They just think they're getting away with it. But there is a difference between getting away with it entirely and getting away with it partially. And I feel like most of the time you're getting away with it partially. Because, frankly speaking, I've seen it, right? I'm thinking back to an example. There was a day where I had to give a quiz, but I wasn't there that day. I had to give my students this quiz, but I wasn't able to make it. I give out the quiz. Anyway, with a substitute teacher, they hand out the quiz. This is, I know there's probably going to be some shenanigans, but this is the best I can do in terms of timing and everything. When I read those quizzes the next day, I want to express this thoroughly. The amount of people that made it so blatantly obvious that they cheated is ridiculous. And I'm not saying like there's a ton of people cheating. I'm just saying the ones that did cheat were very obvious about it. Like, you can tell when someone didn't cheat, when someone did cheat. You'll see the good work, you'll see like their thoughts organized on that paper, right? But the ones that do cheat, it's all like carbon copies, right? Every single time it's a carbon copy of another paper or a certain question or whatever. And it's so blatantly obvious that it's like comedic how obvious it is. And, at the end of the day, I can't do anything, really. I know they cheated. I'm very confident in the fact that they cheated. But all you can really do is try to avoid having that in the future, right? It's one of those things where it's like, sometimes the scheduling does not allow you to do what you want to do. So you kind of have to just put up with it, understand the situation, and realize, frankly speaking, if they have one grade that's pretty high on a test or a quiz, if they're cheating, all their other grades are probably going to be significantly lower. Because when you're in that classroom, they're not going to be looking at these things, and it's, frankly speaking, the one test or whatever that they get away with it, it's not going to save them. So it's one of those things where it's like, a lot of people probably get away with it in terms of they're not going to get called out. But we know, And frankly, you're probably going to be watched more next time. You know, if you cheated on a quiz, then your next test, the teacher's going to be watching you like a hawk, right? So at the end of the day, it just devalues that as a whole. So it's like, you're not getting away with it. You're just kind of prolonging the inevitable. And then when you do get caught on that test, inevitably, because you cheated on the quiz, what tends to happen is you get a 0 on this test, and it ends up just removing whatever good graces that quiz gave you to begin with. I don't know. It's just one of those funny things to me where it's like, at the end of the day, all students are terrible at acting. You know, you can pretend to be sick all you want. Most of your teachers know you're sick. They know when you're sick, they know when you're not sick. They know you well enough to understand. If you're coughing blatantly, teachers know. And then the same thing goes with tests and quizzes. They know when you cheat. You might think you did get away with something, you probably didn't. What in reality happened was the teacher probably just had no way to definitively say that you cheated, and they just went along with it. But I imagine in the end, if you continued that process of cheating on every single exam you do, you're going to get caught. So at the end of the day, is it really worth it? Probably not. All it does is put more suspicion on you, because a teacher is going to realize, like, hey, that student cheated. And then next time they see, you know, you taking a test or a quiz, they're going to be watching you more, right? You're going to get more eyes on you because you cheated that one time and they didn't catch you, because now they want to catch you. So it's just a funny thing where it's like, at the end of the day, you don't get away with anything. And frankly speaking, it's funny to think that you get away with it. And I think looking back, a lot of people realize that, yeah, I probably didn't get away with that, or my acting was bad, or blah, blah, blah. But at the time, you never really think about it. You think, man, I am getting away with murder. I don't know. It's just kind of funny to me to think about. But yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to chat a little bit about some stuff. And I figured, you know, something that I'm doing on the daily is a little bit easier to chat about than something I don't do on the daily. I know it's weird in terms of like what else this channel entails, but I think it's fun nonetheless. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's about it. I'd appreciate it if you could like, comment, subscribe, you know, the boring YouTube stuff. And yeah, I don't know. Have a nice day.